Hey guys, so this is a response video to a comment I got that was asking me about my opinion on Sam and Jordan's discussion on his Waking Up podcast. And we're more of a songwriting, music type of blog, but we do talk about philosophy sometimes. I do have a little interest in it, and it does come from the music side anyways, because music and art in general are built on the bedrock of philosophical values or the value system of the artist. So it doesn't hurt to talk about these things. Alright, so let's look at there were two discussions that they had. The first one was a bit more rough than the second, just because they couldn't get through their definitions of truth or what is true. Which I thought was a bit annoying in the first episode. It's like, let's move on and talk about other things. And there were a lot of missed opportunities, and the people had spoken, and Sam said that 82% of his audience wanted to hear another conversation. So they did have another one. I'm doing this video way after I've heard this conversation, so it's not fresh in my mind, but I still remember my thoughts on it. Sam, first of all, the discussion is beautiful because you have these mammoth intellects going at it about what is true and whether we should take a Newtonian approach or a Darwinian approach, and if things are, true enough, as Jordan says. So their difference in point of view is very clear to me, and it's also the reason I think Jordan has gained so much popularity so quickly, is that for the longest time, when you keep hearing, if only we're always in pursuit of pure rationality, if we are in pursuit of science and truth, and all these things we have ever done before are just wrong and terrible, then people are like, well, wait a second, like, what about all these subtleties and all these nuances and music and art and love and religion? What does it mean? We still have religion, so what does that mean at the end of the day? And I think the most important distinction Jordan did, especially on Joe Rogan's podcast, was that he made that distinction. He said, science tells us what things are. Religion tells us how to act. And it's a very general way of putting it, but it's true. And I think that in Jordan's view, there's more of a totality of a situation, or the totality of a human being and what a human being is. And they got hung up sometimes, like when Jordan would mention the discovery of sacrifice, and Sam spoke about, well, would you, thank God we don't have that anymore, right? Thank God we don't sacrifice human beings anymore. But see, that's the only thing about this discussion that bothers me, is that they're talking at a cross purpose. Because obviously, Jordan doesn't want people to sacrifice other people in the street and say, oh, look, we've discovered time. He's just saying that discovery was an important one and it means something. It's foolish to assume that people will act rationally if you tear away an institution. And I think that's what bothered me a bit about the exchange. I mean, it's obvious that I lean towards Jordan's side a bit more. Not that I don't think that Sam Harris is brilliant in so many respects, and I'm a huge listener of his podcast, and I listen to it all the time. But I think Jordan is just adding something to the conversation that isn't there right now. Because I think that these type of intellectuals have kind of caricaturized themselves to a point where we can't discuss things that aren't completely logical or make sense empirically. And it's like, well, okay, so how do we talk about music? It's a human universal. It's something everyone listens to, and obviously values are transmitted through music, culture, movies, plays, Shakespeare. I don't want us... The problem with this type of thinking is that it undervalues art at the end of the day. And that's what I really didn't like about the discussion is... I don't remember if this was the first discussion or the second one, but Sam had this... He always quotes one of his own books where he talks about a recipe as if it were a religious rite or something, and that he flowers it with pretty language, and he can convince someone that this means something more than what it actually is. And I sincerely call bullshit on that example. Now, why I call bullshit is because I've been trying to affect people with music and art for the past 15 years, and it's not easy. People are not easily fooled. People are not easily swayed towards anything. No matter how terrible or awful we think institutions are, we always need to seriously ask the question, what pushes people towards something? And it's not easy to persuade them. And don't think you're going to persuade them just by using, elegant language. The core of what you're saying needs to be strong enough to pull them your way. And I think Sam kind of missed that with his example. I think he thought he had cornered Jordan a bit by saying, well, you can find meaning in anything. Because Jordan is a big fan of Jungian archetypes and stories and myths and drama. What does drama mean to people? Right? Why the hell do we spend $1 billion on the next Avenger movie? It boggles the mind. Why? $1 billion for a movie? It means that we get value from it. We get something from watching a movie. We get something from listening to a piece of music. And again, is that true? Is what Verdi or Wagner or Puccini or Beethoven say in a symphony or an opera, is that true? Right? Is it true the way we can analyze some sort of experiment or analyze an atom? Is it true in that sense as well? Well, yes and no. The love that Mimi and Rodolfo experience in La Bohème is true. And it's the only way to really express it and show it to another human being. Even if you were to bring me the chemical equation for love, would mean nothing to me. But yet I watch a love movie or a love story, and that means a whole world to me. So I think you have two very different minds here working on different levels, and they're both brilliant, and they both have advantages and disadvantages to the way they think, which is why I think their conversation is more important than anything. But I think that Sam's side limits him. I think he thinks that he's caught a grasp of spirituality and drama and story, but from his example, I don't think he has the power of culture and music and religion. I'm kind of putting it in the same category because it's the same thing, really. It's so strikingly similar in some sense. You go watch the Avengers. There's Thor and Loki are actual gods, and it's not that you believe that they exist or not. They obviously don't. It's a movie, but you leave the theater fulfilled with some sort of meaning. And that's the important part, is that that's a type of currency. That's a type of value. Human beings can't live without that. Imagine this for a second, that the whole world is just pure rationality and pure facts. Everything is a fact or it's not a fact. Everything is true or not true. Where's the inspiration to build anything? Where's the inspiration to create new things that imbue us with meaning? Where does meaning fall in all of this? Why do I hang this painting on my wall? Why do I decorate my shelves the way I do? Why do I buy the books I do? Well, because they are a representation of my identity and how I function in the world and how I move forward. So, is Radiohead's music important, as is the pursuit of what is demonstrably true? Well, I would say it is. Of course it's important. It has influenced my whole life to help me find meaning, as well as I'm sure millions of other people who follow Radiohead. And they have taught us how to hear new things, right? That is the purpose of an artist. An artist teaches you how to see something new. A musician teaches you how to hear something new. And it's important. It's much more important than we think it is. We should go back to, a century ago when people were thought that art was an important thing and would give money to it all the time. And now it's kind of like, well, the sciences will bring us forward. And they will, of course. It's an extremely powerful tool. But we should stop undervaluing art and culture, which has fundamentally in some way replaced the purpose of religion. These things are subtle and complex. I mean, it's impossible to dissect it all and say, well, this is the answer. There are many answers. There's a moving truth underneath all, underneath the fabric of existence. So I find it, you could tell the difference even in tone between Sam and Jordan. Jordan is clearly an artist more than anything. He's a very passionate speaker, and he looks at things in a... I'm trying to collect my thoughts here, because this is unscripted, I'm just going off what I'm thinking, but what Jordan is discovering is kind of like behavioral truths that appear in religion, art, and culture. And what that means. And if I can simplify the whole argument, is that Sam is not convinced that those things exist the same way something else is true. Like, this table is this table. It's true that it's a table, right? Empirically. He's not convinced, but it does take a more artistic mind to be convinced of those things, because we feel how it's true. You think of an actor and how they dissect a play that they're about to do, or a movie, or a character, and they make that character real. Now that actor is working on 7 different levels at once, because everything the character does is a consequence of the action they take, and their personalities, and their biography, and their back history. It's and what does that mean? And then you have the plot, the structure of the plot, which is built in a certain way to make you feel like you have a hero and he wants something, right? And he changes from the beginning to the end, and that says something about us. So is that true, right? When you watch a great film and it affects you a certain way, is that true? So, I think that's the fundamental difference in their argument. And yeah, I thought the discussion was fascinating, super fascinating. I honestly want them to go at it again and again and again until they keep hashing out all these ideas, because I think we're on the brink of something really interesting. That's an old idea, but it's been given a fresh perspective. And it's kind of fulfilled something in me, in a sense, because I've always thought these things, kind of, and I never really knew how to express them. About music, when I was a kid, and I would just buy scores from the music store and just look at them in awe of what was going on. You know, like, how is this piece of music so incredible? You know, why? There's more to it than it's just music. Why the hell do we still talk about Bach? Like, really? You know, it's been hundreds of years. So there's something there that we haven't quite figured out yet. And Jordan has kind of opened my eyes to that type of inquiry and that investigation. So, yeah, those are my 2 cents on the conversation. I think it was really cool. There was so much to dissect. I'm sorry if I couldn't get through everything. I really just stuck to there are different versions of truth, and I think that, you know, Sam is hyper rational and scientific. It's very interesting. You could hear it in his voice. You hear it in the way he formulates his thoughts. And Jordan is also scientific, but he's a bit more acquainted with what it means to be human, kind of. Not that Sam isn't. Like, it's not. I'm really not. I don't want to pick a side. I favored Jordan only because it resonates with my character, but not because I think he's right. I don't know if he's right or not. It's just something that resonates more with me. And there's something Sam says that resonate more with me. It's just wherever there's a bit of room for art to be taken a bit more seriously, I like that interpretation more. Because it's important. It's important. It's like, you know, you go around and we talk about taste. Taste is important. What you wear is important. Your aesthetic judgment is actually important. Like, it's not something to be taken for granted. Beauty is important, you know? And not in the sense that we're probably thinking now, like superficial beauty and a supermodel. But beauty in life. Whether it is aesthetic beauty or inner beauty or musical beauty or meaning, it's we need to study that a tiny bit more in North American culture. Because if you go to Europe, it's fucking beautiful everywhere. You stand in front of a church and you marvel at humanity's capacity to create something so beautiful in what they thought was a symbol of life. How do we symbolize life nowadays, right? Binging some stupid show on Netflix? I know it seems trivial, but we used to Wagner wrote an epic opera. He wrote like a whole slew of them to create something amazing, to say something that he thought was profound, right? We need to do more of that. But the only way to do more of that is to believe that it's worth something. Because if we don't believe it's worth anything, then the shittiest songs in the world are still going to get 1 billion views on YouTube. Because it doesn't permeate culture to say that this is important, this is actually important to learn. Yes, you should be familiar with at least one Mozart piece, or one Beethoven piece, or one contemporary composer, you know? Did you know Stockhausen invented electronic music? Maybe just listen to one of his pieces. It's an important thing. It's not to be taken for granted. That's why I think that the world is not just a collection of truths. It's much more than that. It's much more. Because once you put the human experience down, it changes all those relationships. It creates something new. And if you're truly in the pursuit of seeing what is a human being, what is he made of? Why does he act that way? Right? You can't go into that question thinking that everything we did before was wrong. and we only know now the best way to act. The wrong way of looking at it. You go back and you say, given the limits of then, did those people act as rationally as they were capable of acting? And it's funny, I make a parallel with that argument with an argument I used to have in university, where it was like the really super cool composers would just shit all over someone like Donizetti for his simple melodies, or Mozart, which is beyond crazy because Mozart is, if you don't know, one of the greatest composers that ever lived, and you should listen to every single thing he ever wrote. But the parallel I'm making is, well, obviously, if in 2017 you look back to Haydn and you say, well, that's a simple symphony, it doesn't mean anything. But you got to look at it going forward. You should look at Haydn through Bach's eyes. You should look at Mozart through Handel's eyes, right? Because there was no Stravinsky. There wouldn't be a Stravinsky if there wasn't a Mozart. So, that little dissonant note in Beethoven's Third Symphony, in the Eroica, when it comes in and it pierces at the top, that's the equivalent of Robert Plant shouting at the top of his lungs in 1971, as it was for Beethoven in 1803. So, I think the point I'm getting at, besides general ramblings, is it's important to keep a sort of historical context in things. And I think what we've done to religion a bit too far is say, well, anything that was ever religious is terrible. And it's like, whoa, hold on. Like, we need to look at ancient civilizations and the way things were before and say, were they acting as rationally as they could have acted? What did they, they didn't have the same information we have. And you know what? Sometimes we don't have the information they have. Our technology distances us from sometimes true and human experiences. But that's a separate discussion. Anyways, I hope this answers your question. I kind of went on a crazy tangent, but I just like to talk and see where it heads. But if you're interested, subscribe to the show, subscribe to the YouTube, check out our Patreon, and there's more to come. So thanks for listening. Till next time. Ciao.